28 weeks, so you could be 6 months in, have a healthy baby, fully formed, sucking its thumb, can feel pain, has a heartbeat, and they would say for no reason at all, the baby can be aborted, but which is bad, and I know most people do not support that. But they then have a loophole which says, or whenever a, quote, healthcare provider deems it necessary for the health of the patient, but they do not define what health of the patient is. And so it would effectively greenlight an abortion by a non-physician at any time up to the moment of birth. Obviously, pro-lifers don't like that. But even if you're not pro-life, I think everyone agrees there needs to be some limit. This would remove all limits in the state of Florida, and it would be very, very bad. I also just pointed out about the healthcare provider. That is very, very important language that they use. And again, this is the Constitution. So when that is there, if there's problems with it, you can't legislate against that and, quote, fix it. It's there for good, and there's really no realistic way it could ever be remedied. And so you hear people, and look, there's folks that are pro-life, there's folks that are not pro-life. But amongst the people that are not pro-life, a lot of them don't necessarily want a lot of abortions. They want it to be rare. But their view would be that there maybe shouldn't be legal protections for the unborn, and instead just let the mother and the doctor sort out what to do. And then you hear that refrain a lot. This amendment substitutes healthcare provider in place of a physician. So you will have late-term abortions greenlit and performed by non-doctors as a matter of constitutional right if this were to pass. I don't even think California would allow a non-physician to approve or perform a late-term abortion. So this is incredibly extreme. There's no way to legislate around it. They don't define what a healthcare provider is, and so what that means is there's going to be non-physicians that set up these bootleg abortion clinics, and if you try to regulate it, they're going to sue, and they're going to say, I'm a healthcare provider, look what this amendment does. So it's very, very dangerous, and it would absolutely lead to huge problems for women and for children to allow this amendment to pass. So you talk about a mother and the doctor, that's been a familiar refrain. This cuts doctors out. You would not need to have a doctor at all. And look, these are a lot of the folks that are involved in this process, they're vulnerable. A lot of these women don't have any support. They get pushed into doing some of this stuff, and I think this opens the door for some really, really bad mistreatment. So that is in the amendment, and that's very scary. It also eliminates, it's the first amendment that actually revokes rights, because it revokes the right of parental consent for minors with respect to abortion. And they do this through a sleight of hand, because if you read the text of the ballot summary, it says, nothing in this amendment should prohibit the legislature from enacting legislation for parental notification. But that's different than consent. Our current law in Florida is like anything medical for minors. The parent has to consent. I mean, they can't give your kid Tylenol without you consenting. I mean, I think most parents think that's appropriate. This would say the parent loses that decision-making on the issue of abortion, which is a very significant issue for the health of the mother, obviously for the future of the unborn child, has huge psychological ramifications, and they're stripping the right of parent to have the consent. So you would have a situation, and again, this is in the Constitution. There's no way you could change it if it passes. A young person a minor could not get Tylenol without parental consent, but they could get a late-term abortion performed by a non-physician without parental consent. That is crazy. Regardless of your position on right to life, that is absolutely crazy. And you probably haven't heard much from the proponents about what their amendment actually does, because they don't want to talk about that. They basically spent all their money running a campaign just lying about what Florida law does. They try to say that it does not have exceptions for rape and incest, life and health of the mother, which is a lie. Florida's law, you can look it up, It says abortions are available until the unborn child has a detectable heartbeat, but there's exceptions for rape, incest, victims of human trafficking, the life and health of the mother, but the health of the mother is defined in ways that can't be manipulated like they would want to do with this amendment. So anybody, they'll have these doctors saying, oh, well, Florida law does not allow me to provide care to my patient that had a miscarriage. That's a lie. And if any physician is saying that or acting that way, they're committing malpractice, and they could lose their medical license. Physicians have a responsibility to know what their duties are. They have a right to know what their law is. So all the stuff they're saying is really running against provisions of law that do not exist in the state of Florida. And I think that's telling, because if their amendment was something that was really good, wouldn't they want to be talking about, hey, this amendment is going to take away the rights of parents. This amendment is going to greenlight non-physicians to perform late-term abortions. This amendment is going to remove all limits. This amendment is going to do it. No, of course they don't want to do that, because it wouldn't be popular, and they know that they would lose. So don't allow these lies to go unchallenged. The state has run a lot of public service announcements just clarifying what Florida law is. They are talking about these issues of rape, incest, life, health of the mother, which are not issues under Florida law at all. That's the playbook they run in other states, so they're just trying to run it here, thinking that people aren't going to take the time to actually know what the law is. And so this is an easy amendment to vote no on. Clearly, if you're pro-life, it's a no-brainer. But even if you're not, this is not the way you go about doing abortion policy. This is really, really crazy. It will likely lead to taxpayers having to fund these abortions, because what happened in Michigan, they ran a similar amendment. The amendment passed, and then they went into court and they sued. And they said, well, as a matter of constitutional right, the taxpayers have to provide funding for this. And that will happen in Florida if this passes. They will go into court. They will do that. They will find a liberal judge, and chances are a liberal judge will rule for them. And all of a sudden, voila, your tax dollars are going to be forced to fund an industry that is very profit-centric, that cares more about making money than it does about protecting mothers and children. And it would be really, really inappropriate use of tax dollars. But that is absolutely coming down the pike if this ends up passing. So, the Republican Party of Florida has endorsed a no vote on Amendment 4. The Democratic Party of Florida has endorsed a yes vote on Amendment 4, and Kamala Harris is supporting Amendment 4. And so we recommend that you please come out and vote no, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, make sure they understand what's at stake. You can't unring this bell. If this were just a random piece of legislation in the legislature, if it did some of these bad things, you could elect new people and you could fix it. This is for keeps. This will never be changed. This will be part of Florida's Constitution forever. It will lead to an increase in the number of abortions by between 40 and 50,000 if this passes, and that's an awful lot. We already have thousands a month under our Heartbeat Protection Act. This would likely double that. And we would be one of the most, if not the most, radical abortion regime anywhere in the entire world, but certainly in the United States. So please vote no on this. I think it's a no-brainer. This is a horribly written amendment. It's deceitful, and regardless of where you are on the right to life, this is not good policy, and it's not good for the state of Florida.
Thank you, Governor. Don't go everywhere, everybody. We've got a few minutes for some questions. We've got many questions coming in. We're definitely not going to be able to get to all of them, but I'm going to give you my email. Again, this is James. I'm the Governor's Chief of Staff. The email address is not hard to remember. It's james@rondesantis.com. james@rondesantis.com. So if we can't get to your question, get it to us, and we'll certainly get you an answer back. So we have time for a few. We've got one. Julian from Miami asks, Governor DeSantis, you mentioned that if Amendment 3 passes, people will be authorized to smoke marijuana in public places. Does this mean somebody could be smoking weed while next to me sitting inside a restaurant eating dinner?
Yes. I think that what will happen is because of the way the amendment's written, they're saying that you have a constitutional right to possess and smoke. And that's different than what Colorado did or California did. And so it's not the same as just saying weed is decriminalized. So you have a constitutional right. If you go in to a public place and you're smoking weed, what are they going to do? They can't penalize you under the way this is written. And so this is different than how Colorado and California did it. I'd also point out, people say, oh, well, you can't do it because Florida has an indoor smoking ban. Read the indoor smoking ban. That applies to tobacco. It does not apply to marijuana. And even if it did, this is a constitutional provision that would trump that because you have a right. And it says you cannot be penalized for smoking. You can't have criminal, civil, or any type of sanctions. And again, that's not the way to do this. If you're going to do it, you got to say that there are certain places where it's off limits. And if you do bring it into a restaurant, then you should be able to be restricted from doing that. So the way the amendment's written, it's going to be, anything's going to go. But here's the thing. Some say, oh, well, the legislature can come in and they can fix this. First of all, that's just not true. And if you read the actual text of the amendment, there's nothing in the amendment that would give the legislature that authority. But let's just say the legislature, for the sake of argument, somehow could be allowed to do it. Nothing's going to end up being enforced. Why? Because law enforcement is not going to, they're not going to spend time policing whether it's being used in a restaurant or not if it's a constitutional right. They're just going to want to stay out of it because they're not going to want to end up getting sued or having all this litigation, which will definitely end up happening. So this is a horribly written amendment. It's not designed to protect your quality of life. It's designed to make the company that put $100 million into this profits. And that's why they wrote it the way they did. So if you're trying to protect the quality of life in this state, if you want to protect people's freedom to be able to breathe clean air and be in these spaces without having this intrude, this amendment is not giving you the protection you deserve.
All right, this is James again. As a reminder to everybody, if you want to ask a question, please press *3. We won't have time for everybody. If you don't get through, you can send questions to james@rondesantis.com. If you want to pitch in to help us fight these dangerous amendments, please dial 1. So the next question here is coming in from Amber in Orlando. Governor, you mentioned 5 companies or a bunch of companies would have a monopoly over the marijuana industry in Florida if Amendment 3 passes. Does this mean that home grow is unlawful under Amendment 3?
There is no authorization for you to grow your own under this. You can possess and smoke it, but you must buy it from them. And they wrote that deliberately. They could have written in the amendment that you have the right to cultivate, possess, and smoke. They could have done that, and they chose not to. Why? Because it would have hurt their ability to profit off of it. If you're able to grow your own, then you don't need them. You don't need to have a commercial relationship with them. And they wouldn't spend $100 million to get the amendment passed if that were the case. And so there is no home grow on this. And again, if you want to say do what's best for freedom, if that was what they were trying to do, you would do the exact opposite of what they would do. You wouldn't create a big weed cartel. You would tell people, what you grow on your own property and use on your property for personal use is your business, but don't infringe on people's freedom by bringing it out into public. That would maximize freedom because you have the freedom of people that may want to be involved in marijuana, but you got a lot more people that don't want to be involved in marijuana, and they don't want that to intrude on them. The way Trulieve wrote this is the opposite. You can't grow your own on your own property, but there's no limitations on public use. And so those people that don't want marijuana, that they just don't want to be involved with it, and I would say 90% of the people that don't want to be involved with marijuana, they don't want the smell, a lot of them don't care what you do in your own house. They just want to be able to enjoy themselves with their family and friends without having this everywhere like they have in Colorado and California and some of these places. And so it's the opposite of what you would do if you were trying to promote freedom. And of course, that's not their goal. Their goal is to protect their profits and generate more profits. They would not have spent Just think about it. How many companies just have $100 million sitting around that they're able to plow in to running television commercials and trying to pursue a constitutional amendment? I mean, that would be a massive breach of a fiduciary duty unless you could then show that on the back end of spending all that money, you would be able to reap really significant profits. And so the only way they could justify that was to not authorize you to grow your own, but to force you to have a commercial relationship with them. That is not freedom. That is not true market economics. It's certainly not something that should be in a state's constitution.
Thank you, Governor. We have time for a few more questions. As a reminder, we've got some latecomers coming onto the call. We're talking about Amendments 3 and 4, how dangerous they are for the state of Florida. The Republican Party of Florida has endorsed against both amendments. We really need you to get out and vote no. Another question coming in on Amendment 3. Again, dial *3 if you want to ask a question. Dial 1 if you want to pitch in to help us fight these amendments. The next question is from Carrie in Tampa on Amendment 3. Governor, if Amendment 3 passes, does this mean I'm going to smell weed throughout the stadium the next time I go to the Tampa Bucks game?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think that's likely the case. Because, again, the way it's written is you can't grow your own, but you do have a right to smoke it without limitation if you buy it from True Leaf and their partner companies. And there's nothing in the amendment that would allow any type of sanction for people who are using it. And the only way you would be able to prevent it being in a stadium is to say someone could be fined or something if they're doing it. But if you read the text of the amendment, it says no penalties of any kind, and it's a blanket prohibition. So it's not a well-written amendment. It's not designed for your quality of life. It's designed to protect this company's ability to profit off Floridians.
Next question, still Amendment 3. This is David in Panama City. Governor, you mentioned that this constitutional right was written so that people could never sue the companies that sell marijuana if they get sick. They would be exempt from any liability. Has a company ever had any protection like that in a constitution?
Not that I'm aware of. And again, if you read the ballot summary that is on your ballot, you would have no idea that this immunity is in there. You actually have to read the text of the amendment that would be in the Constitution, which they don't give you. You got to go online, Secretary of State's office, click on the text. But what it says is at all areas of the operation, from cultivation to sale, that there shall be no civil liability or sanctions on these companies whatsoever. Now, if they sell you defective weed and you turn around and sue them, their lawyers are going to go into court. They're going to cite this provision in Florida's Constitution, and they're going to say the case should be dismissed. There is nothing in the text that they're proposing that would allow you to bring traditional negligence actions or product liability actions. They could have written it in a way, and in fact, our medical marijuana is written in a way that says, nothing in this would prevent you from bringing negligence actions. That's not what they wrote here. They did a blanket immunity. Now, they'll probably deny that's what would happen because they want it to pass. But the minute that it passes and the minute they're faced with lawsuits for either their business operations or their product quality, they will run to this provision. They will cite that. And, I think most courts are going to side with them at that point. I think they will be found to be immune from any civil liability resulting from their business operations.
Thank you, Governor. Thanks to everybody out there. We've got thousands of people contributing to help us fight these dangerous amendments 3 and 4. Again, dial 1 if you want to pitch in to help us. A question now on Amendment 4. This is coming from Mel in Jupiter. Mel writes, Governor, under Amendment 4, you said that non-doctors would be able to make determinations that women are in a health situation where an abortion is necessary. Do you mean that non-doctors would also be allowed to perform the abortion?
That's what it says. I mean, again, they don't define this. The text is very cryptic. But that is what they said. They did not use the term physician. They did not use the term doctor. They used the term healthcare provider. Well, somebody that is working for Planned Parenthood as a clerk is technically a healthcare provider. People that are involved in a whole host of branches of medicine that have nothing to do with pregnancy and childbirth, they're healthcare providers. And so that trumps any statute that we have that requires licensed physicians be the one that would be working with the mother on this. And so, yes, I mean, it's there in black and white. It's crazy that they would have chosen that term, but they did. And some people say, well, why would you do that? Because so much has been made on the abortion side about the mother consulting with the doctor. And I think the reason they did it is because they'll make more money this way. Because, in Florida, like as I said, there's abortions up until the point where there's a child's heartbeat, and then with the exceptions, rape, incest, life of the mother, health of the mother, victims of human trafficking, as set forth in statute. But anytime there's an abortion performed, you got to have a physician that has admitting privileges at a hospital. You've got to be within certain proximity of a hospital because these are risky procedures. And if something goes wrong, you need to be able to have the mother be in a place where she can get the care that she needs at a hospital. All of those types of regulations would go out the window with Amendment 4, the way it's written. So it's a horribly written amendment. Again, it's not designed for the best interests of the state. It's not designed for the health and welfare of mothers or children or babies. It is designed to basically pad the profits of the abortion industry. And that's why they're putting so much money into this. That's why you have people like George Soros and his organizations that have plowed millions of dollars into it. And so it's a very reckless amendment, the way it's written. And again, regardless of where you are in right to life, I mean, if you're pro-life, you should be against it. But even if you're not, this is not an appropriate thing to put in a Constitution the way it's written.
All right, we've got a couple more questions. Tim from Jacksonville says that I've got a 16-year-old daughter, so the topic of parental consent is very important to me. I've seen the ads against 4 saying that it would eliminate parental consent, but the proponents are arguing that parental consent would be preserved. What's going on here?
It's a bait and switch that the people that are proposing Amendment 4 are eliminating parental consent, but they know that's very unpopular, and so they're saying that they're preserving parental notification. But that is not the same as parental consent. And so you can have a postcard sent to you saying, hey, your kid's going to have an abortion, tonight at 7 o'clock, and there's nothing you can do to prevent that. And so it is taking away the right of parents to consent. It's a bait and switch. Notification is not consent. Our laws on the books are consent across the board for minors. With medical, this would change that.
All right. Kelly from Fort Myers says, we heard from Sheriff Wayne Ivey at the beginning of the call that this amendment would allow up to 100 joints on your person, but would it also allow the gummies and candies and things that are more attractive to kids?
Oh, 100%. I mean, this is the Wild West in terms of what the weed cartel could sell. They could do the gummies. They could do anything they wanted. There'd be no way to rein that in if they marketed things that were attractive to minors. I don't think you'd be able to do anything because they gave themselves blanket liability. And so yes, that will run rampant. That's what's happened in Colorado. That's what's happened in California. Again, this is less freedom in terms of you can't grow it yourself and you got to have a transaction with them. But the companies that are funding this, they're giving themselves a lot of freedom to be immune from accountability, to offer, these products how they want to do it. And even if kids are being harmed, I think functionally the way the amendment's written, it'd be very difficult to legislate any type of meaningful protections in practice. And so very dangerous, I think, what would come down the pike. And, the thing is like I see a lot of stuff as governor come down the transom, legislation, this, that, about, how it would impact the state of Florida. And, this Amendment 3, this is a very foreseeable own goal if voters approve this. There will be buyer's remorse on this very quickly once people see how this operates. If you're someone that likes marijuana, there are things you could propose, that potentially could be done that would not cause all these problems. This Amendment 3 is not that. This would create a whole host of problems for the state, and we would never really be able to fix them because it would be in the Constitution. So really, really bad. And the question is why take the risk? Why vote for an amendment? I mean, unless they've answered all these questions, and we've raised so many objections to this, it's like, no, don't vote for it. They should have to show you that they have something that is foolproof, that will actually be good for the state of Florida. And the fact that we're having to argue and point out all these things on both 3 and 4, and then others say, oh, no, it does have to, these bait and switches, that's not the way this stuff is supposed to be done. These things, honestly, the Supreme Court split about whether they should be allowed on the ballot to begin with. Usually, they're not supposed to allow things on the ballot that are misleading or that don't give you a full understanding. You read the summary on Amendment 3, you would have no clue that they're granting themselves blanket immunity from civil liability. No clue. It's not in the summary. Well, how is that a way to do business? The abortion amendment, they don't even define the terms on any of this stuff. Not the way to do business. And so this is not the way you do self-government, where people don't even really know what's going to end up happening. It's like, remember Nancy Pelosi said you pass the bill to find out what's in the bill? Well, both Amendment 3 and 4 would basically be passing the amendments and then finding out what's in the amendments, because you're opening up Pandora's box on both things. And look, if it were just normal legislation, you could fix Pandora's box with other legislation. Once it's in the Constitution, the problems are permanent.
Well, thanks, everybody. These are important fights against 3 and 4, which the Republican Party of Florida has endorsed against both amendments. We're asking you to vote no. If you want to pitch in, thousands of you already have. Thank you so much. Please dial 1. If you want to grab a pen to get it handy, before we sign off, I'll give you websites for both amendments where you can get additional information, flyers, and things to help educate others. But Governor, any closing words for the group here?
Look, we've, our state in many respects is the envy of the country, certainly from a Republican perspective. You see it in the migration. You see it in people switching from Democrat to Republican, independent to Republican in record numbers over the last 3 or 4 years. We've got a lot of momentum. Yeah, there's other things we've got to do as a state, and we're working hard to tackle a whole bunch of issues. These 2 amendments are not good for the state. These 2 amendments are not good for the bulk of people in the state of Florida. These 2 amendments should be voted down. And here's the thing. We went through the problems with both of them, and they're very real, and they would cause a lot of problems. But I can tell you, if the left sees that they can get into our Constitution by just spending $100 million with some confusing ballot language, and then all of a sudden they can't win an election in Florida, they can't win. We have supermajorities in the legislature. We have, obviously, all the statewide electeds are Republicans. They can't win. And so if they can do this stuff through these amendments, they can make us California through the back door. You will see so much left-wing money flow into Florida in 26 and 28 with every pet liberal issue under the sun. They will try to jam into our Constitution. And we can wake up 6-8 years from now, and all of a sudden, even though Republicans keep winning elections, we end up like California because of these amendments. And so I think it's important to beat them in their own right, but I also think that this is something that these well-financed interests will absolutely try to manipulate going forward. And I do think it's a threat to the viability of the state of Florida. If we just let people like George Soros and all these left-wing groups and Kamala Harris get their way on our amendments, well, then our Constitution ends up putting us in the direction of a California or New York. And we've got a lot of people that have fled that type of governance to Florida to be able to have a refuge of sanity. So let's keep Florida. Let's not let these things intrude. They're horribly written amendments. Regardless of your policy views, they are horrendously written amendments because they're not designed to benefit Florida. They're designed to support the specific interests of the people that are funding both of the amendments, and that is wrong.
Well, thank you, Governor. We're lucky to have the greatest governor, the greatest state. Thanks to all of you at home. You're what makes these fights possible. Again, if you want to chip in, please, we need to help. We've got to defeat these dangerous amendments 3 and 4. Please press 1 if you'd like to do that. Thousands of you already have. Thank you so very, very much. And then there's websites I'll read to you if you've got your pen handy and you want to get more information, get some videos and pamphlets and things. For Amendment 3, the website is no-on3.com. No-on3.com. And for 4, it is VoteNoOn4Florida.com. VoteNoOn4Florida.com. Thank you all again. Please get out, vote, share the word with all your friends. We've got to defeat these things. Thank you and good night.